Hey, my friends, before the show starts, I want to ask you guys for a little bit of help. My dog, Chicano, recently had surgery, which a lot of you helped me pay for, and I can't tell you how grateful I am. Unfortunately, we've found out that he has cancer, and that it's worse than we originally thought. So, he's beginning chemotherapy and having tests run all the time, and it's getting very, very expensive. I've already charged it all to my credit card, but if you want to help just a little bit, all you have to do is go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Help My Dog. Any amount helps, and I really do appreciate it. Now let's get on with the show. Small towns often carry very big secrets. But in this case, in a little sleepy burg in Ohio, someone has decided to air everyone's dirty laundry, and they want something in return for their silence.
What you are about to hear is believed to be real, based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
This is a story I've been fascinated by since I was very young when I first heard about it on Unsolved Mysteries. A story of infidelity, of lies, and betrayal. A story about the dangers of being anonymous. Of course, now, with the internet, we're used to people running off their mouths and trying to hurt others because they believe there'll be no consequences. But in the 80s, the only way to do that was to write a letter. Disguise your handwriting, make sure you leave no evidence, and then mail it from somewhere unfamiliar. That level of detail, that level of commitment, makes them much more dangerous than your average internet blowhard. So let's find out what exactly happened in Circleville after these words. Circleville, Ohio was a typical small American town when letters began to arrive, revealing the locals' dark secrets through the mail. The Circleville Letters are a result of divorce, murder, attempted murder, false imprisonment, police cover-ups, and overall, one big mystery. No one has known the identity of the Circleville letter writer since 1976. Circleville, Ohio, located approximately 25 miles south of the state's capital, Columbus, is home to approximately 14,000 people, Ohio Christian University, and is best known for the Circleville Pumpkin Show, which has been held every year since 1903. No one ever suspected such a small town to be full of so many secrets. Mary Gillespie, the local school bus driver, received a postmarked letter from Columbus with no return address in the summer of 1976. The letter accused Mary of having an affair with Gordon Massey, the school superintendent, which she denied. The writer informed Mary that he or she had been watching her home, as well as her husband and children, for some time, and demanded that she end the affair. According to the letter, it said, "I know where you live. I've been observing your house, and I know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it seriously." Ron Gillespie also received a letter saying Mary was in danger if he did not stop the affair. According to the letter, quote, "Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Make her admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CB radio, posters, signs, and billboards, until the truth comes out. The letters were revealed to Mary and Ron Gillespie's close family members. They informed Karen, Ron's sister, her husband, Paul Fresher, and Paul's sister. Paul worked at a local factory and was once a prison guard who survived a 30-hour hostage situation at the Ohio State Penitentiary in 1968. The five got together to talk about the suspects. Mary claimed that it was David Longberry, a bus driver who was romantically interested in her, and she was not, and that David became resentful of her. They decided that Paul Fresher would write David a letter in which he stated that he was aware that David was threatening the Gillespies. And then the letters stopped. August 19th, 1977. Ron Gillespie received a phone call that enraged him. No one knows what the call was about. He took out his gun and informed his children that he was going to speak with the person who was sending the letters. Ron Gillespie was discovered dead after crashing his truck into a tree. A bullet was missing from his gun, indicating that he fired it before he died. There was no bullet casing found at the scene, and Ron's blood alcohol content was 0.16, which was twice the legal limit. His friends and family were shocked to learn of his death because Ron was not a heavy drinker. So many people began to speculate that his death was a police cover-up, that something more serious occurred, and they simply ruled it as drunk driving. Sheriff Radcliffe stated that he initially suspected foul play, but after the suspects, who were not identified, passed a polygraph test, they concluded Ron died as a result of a drunk driving accident. It should be mentioned, polygraph tests are notoriously inconsistent and inaccurate, and are not admissible in a court of law. Following Ron's death, letters began to arrive, this time claiming that Sheriff Radcliffe was involved in some sort of cover-up with Ron's death, and that Mary and Gordon Massey were to blame. Mary admitted to having an affair with George Massey after Ron's death, but she claimed it began after the letters began to arrive. On February 7th, 1983, Mary was driving her usual bus route when she noticed signs posted along the road. According to the signs, they accused George Massey of raping the Gillespies' 12-year-old daughter. Mary stopped the bus and tore down the sign when she was almost killed. The sign was a booby trap, set up to shoot whoever took it down. The serial numbers on the firearm were scratched off, but the lab was able to read them, and the gun was registered to Mary's brother-in-law, Paul Fresher. Paul denied having anything to do with the trap, saying, quote, "I admitted the gun was mine, but I hadn't seen it for a long time. I had no reason to check up on it or anything, and I don't know when it had come up missing. I really don't know what happened to it, and I told them that, and that's the truth, and that's how it was." Paul claimed the gun had been stolen, but never reported it stolen. He was then asked to provide handwriting samples for comparison to the Circleville Letters. The test was not standard. Instead, Paul copied one of the letters rather than writing a sentence in his own handwriting and comparing the two. After that, Paul Fresher was arrested and charged with attempted murder. His trial began on October 24th, 1983. And while he was never charged with writing the letters, they were brought up in court. A handwriting expert testified that Paul was indeed the Circleville letter writer. Mary testified that she suspected Paul was the writer because his wife, Karen, came to her with the same suspicions. Paul's boss also testified that when the booby trap was discovered, he was not at work that day. For the majority of that day, Paul had a solid alibi, but he never took the stand in his own defense, which would only hurt him in the end. Paul was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison. One can only hope that now that Paul is incarcerated, the letters will stop. The mystery in Circleville, however, was far from over. The letters still kept arriving. Paul received a letter from the Circleville writers stating, "Now when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of there? I told you 2 years ago, when we set 'em up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all?" Paul was in solitary confinement, where he had no access to anything, but the letters kept coming. Even though Paul was in prison in Lima, Ohio, and the letters were postmarked from Columbus. The police searched Paul's cell and discovered nothing that would indicate he wrote the letters. The secrets in the new letters were far worse. According to one letter, Roger Klein, the prosecutor in Paul's trial, murdered a pregnant schoolteacher. The writer stated that unless Roger Klein admitted to killing the woman and her unborn child, they would dig up the victims' graves and mail the bones to the police. Paul was denied parole in 1990 after serving 7 years in prison because the board believed he was still the Circleville letter writer. Paul Fresher was released on parole in May 1994 after serving 10 years in prison and claiming he had nothing to do with the letters or the attempted murder. The enigma that is the Circleville Letters was featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, after which they received a letter that read, quote, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. If you come to Ohio, you El Sickos will pay." The Circleville writer. The episode was still aired on November 11th, 1994. The sheriff and Mary Gillespie declined to be interviewed for the story, and that is the last of the Circleville writer. According to rumors, Roger Klein, the prosecutor in Paul's trial, was having an affair with the schoolteacher and was the father of the unborn child. And her death is still a mystery. In December 1993, Dr. Ray Carroll, the coroner who performed Ron Gillespie's autopsy, was exposed in the letter for being a pedophile. He was then charged with 12 counts of gross immorality, sex crimes, corruption of a minor, pornography, obscenity, and indecent exposure. David Longberry, the bus driver Mary suspected of being the writer, raped an 11-year-old girl in 1999, went on the run, and died by suicide. With so many secrets exposed in the small town, there are numerous theories as to who the Circleville writer could be. Some still suspect bus driver David Longberry, while others suspect Paul Freshour. Or Karen Fresher, who was going through a divorce and could use Paul's gun to frame him. Since the first letter was targeted at Mary and Gordon Massey to end their affair, some letters were signed with a W, leading some to suspect it was William Massey, Gordon Massey's son. Others thought it was Mary Gillespie, and many wondered how she knew where to stop the bus and pull down the one sign that was a booby trap, and how she didn't get hurt if it caught her off guard. She admitted to having an affair with Gordon Massey after her husband passed away. But some question whether she would have put up signs claiming her 12-year-old daughter had been raped. Many people still believe Paul is the writer. He still maintained his innocence up until his death in 2012. Nobody knows who the Circleville writer could be, whether it was one of the suspects or another resident. People are still curious about who wrote the letters. Was Ron's death an accident or a murder? And who created the booby trap? Many people speculated that perhaps everyone began airing out secrets and that there was no single person behind all of the letters. Since 1993, no one has heard from the Circleville writer, and the last letter they ever sent was to Unsolved Mysteries. This is an interesting story for me. Being a lifelong Ohioan, I only lived away for about 3 years on the East Coast, I remember being a young boy, homesick from school, watching Unsolved Mysteries, and hearing all about a story of a town not even an hour away from me. In many ways, that was the beginning of the end of my innocence, because I realized that the horrors you see on television and in the movies could actually be, maybe not next door, but definitely a town over. So what do you think? This mystery weaves and weaves and weaves. Do you think that we know who the killer is, but we just haven't caught them? Do you think one of the suspects is accurate? Or do you think that the town as a whole used this as an excuse to air their dirty laundry against each other? Personally, I'm leaning in that direction. It seems to me like there were many authors who took advantage of this situation to push off of themselves the accusations as they committed their petty crimes against each other. But the car crash, the gun with a missing bullet, that makes me truly wonder what happened. Maybe one day we'll know, or maybe we won't. But I know one thing. I'm going to sleep tonight with my doors double locked. Terrifying and True is narrated by Henrik Kuto, executive produced by Rob Fields, and produced by Dan Wilder. The original theme song is composed and performed by Ray Mattis. All other music is from Audioblocks. A huge thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names on the show. And they are Julia Kirsch, Christopher Sullivan, Brent McCullough, Gino Lyons, Steve King, Karen Ouimet, Jack Kerr, Craig Cohen, and Kevin Fry. Thank you all so much. And if you want to join them in supporting the program, just go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can help us keep going and going and going, and you'll get bonus episodes as well. And if you have a story you'd like us to cover, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com.